I still remember that morning vividly. The morning I realized that 9 years of loyalty were worth nothing more than a faint smile and two words: resign now. The conference room on the 13th floor of Helion Dynamics always smelled like burnt coffee and humming air vents. I sat in the third row, surrounded by colleagues who looked half bored, half anxious, some fidgeting with pens, others sneaking glances at their phones. On the big screen, Clara Vaughn's face appeared sharp and immaculate, her poise amplified by the lighting. She had just been appointed vice president, transferring from the well-known Solar Edge Corporation, and this was her first meeting in charge. I expected her to talk about technical direction or upcoming innovations. She didn't. Her speech began with cold precision. Helion needs a new culture, she said. More connected, more disciplined, less free. She spoke about restoring office order, restructuring the innovation model, and reallocating intellectual property rights. My pulse spiked at that last phrase. Starting next quarter, Clara continued, her tone steady, any idea, product, or AI model developed by Helion employees on or off the clock would be registered as company property. No exceptions. The room went silent. Around me, a few heads lowered. Others froze, pretending neutrality. I thought I'd misheard her. Then the words echoed again, perfectly clear. All personal inventions would belong to the company. I'd been with Helion for 9 years. I joined when the company had just 2 office floors and a single server that groaned through the night. We survived power outages, patched code in the dark, and laughed the day our AI finally stabilized. I never thought the company would one day treat us like assets to be restructured. I raised my hand, calm and deliberate. What if an employee writes an algorithm at home, after hours, using personal equipment? Does that still belong to the company? Every eye turned to me. Clara paused for just a second, then smiled, the kind of practiced smile you learn in executive coaching. If that solution aligns with Helion's technological vision, she said smoothly, then of course it belongs to us. If you find this policy unsuitable, she tilted her head slightly, you may submit your resignation. No one breathed. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the beat of my own pulse in my ears. I looked straight at the screen. Understood, I said. She nodded, as if she'd just completed a lesson in obedience, then moved on to the next slide. For the rest of the meeting, her words blurred. Restructure, efficiency, unified culture. They passed through me like rain sliding down glass. My mind wandered to the small room at home, the one I called my insomniac's lab. That's where my old computer sat, filled with code, sketches, and blueprints I'd spent 2 years perfecting. My own creation, built with my own time and money. I remembered what my mother once told me. She had been a mechanical engineer at a power plant. When they start calling creativity a shared asset, she said, lock your door. The day she was fired, she just smiled and said, justice has its own way of finding people. I hadn't understood it then. Now I did. When the meeting ended, everyone stood slowly, silent, distant. I packed my laptop and walked into the hallway. Posters lined the walls, declaring the company's motto, innovation through unity. I let out a small laugh. Unity is built on taking from others. How poetic. Inside the elevator, my reflection looked back at me. Tired, yes, but calm. Not angry, not afraid, just certain. A door had closed, but another was beginning to open. That afternoon, I sat alone in the AI division's small office. The late sunlight stretched across the desk in pale gold. I reopened my laptop, found the folder that held my project, Erebus. I'd never planned to use it as a weapon, but maybe it was time to protect it. I typed one sentence in my technical log, the day Clara Vaughn called loyalty an asset. Then I saved the file, shut the laptop, and stood. As I passed the reception desk, the young clerk asked if I wanted to collect my quarterly award, a small trophy engraved with dedication award. I smiled and shook my head. No thanks. I'm preparing for a different kind of reward. Outside, light rain brushed across Austin's streets. I stopped for a moment, watching the Helion Dynamics sign shimmer in the puddles. 9 years, all undone by one sentence. Yet deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the opening move of a new game, one where I'd no longer be the one taking orders. That night, I wrote the first line in my private journal. After 9 years of loyalty, they told me to resign. Fine, but they forgot. Resigning isn't the same as surrendering. I left the Helion building that day just as the rain stopped. The air in Austin carried the smell of wet soil and exhaust, reflecting the glow of streetlights across the slick pavement. I walked slowly toward the small cafe a few blocks from the office, the one I always went to when I needed to think. The place was quiet, filled only with the sound of the grinder and soft jazz playing somewhere near the counter. I ordered a black coffee with no sugar, opened my laptop, and let my fingers rest on the keyboard without typing a word. 9 years of loyalty, and I no longer knew what to write. When I first joined Helion, it was a small startup with 2 workrooms and one old server whining through the night. We didn't have much money or recognition, just faith that we could build something greater than ourselves. I still remember Mark Hollis, the founder, asking me during my interview, "Are you willing to stay up all night just to fix a single line of code no one will ever notice?" I said yes. Back then, that was all I wanted, to build something that mattered. The early years were unforgettable. We shared cold pizza, ate dinner over keyboards, and laughed until our sides hurt the first time our AI ran without crashing. I trusted Helion the way I trusted myself. In the third year, Google Energy offered me twice my salary. I turned them down, saying I wanted to finish the dream I'd started. At that time, loyalty to Helion meant loyalty to my own belief. Then Helion grew. The founders left, replaced by investors, performance charts, and endless meetings. Passion was slowly traded for reports and polite smiles. I stayed, thinking that if I worked hard enough, things would go back to how they once were. I was wrong. Helion no longer valued competence, only compliance. Ethan Lee was the only one left from the old team. He was almost 10 years younger than me, sharp and quick, with a habit of tapping his keyboard 3 times before running code, his personal good luck ritual. "Do you think they'll really go through with it?" he asked me that day after the tense meeting. "Take our personal ideas?" I looked at him and saw in his eyes the same faith I once had. "Of course they will," I said, "but believing doesn't mean accepting." We stayed late that night. The neon lights cast a cold reflection on the metal desks. Ethan told me Clara was reviewing the internal network, gathering all data into something called the Helion Cloud Archive. Every employee was instructed to upload personal project copies to support the company's new strategic alignment. I understood immediately. They were consolidating everyone's work into a single database, legalizing theft under the guise of structure. After Ethan left, I stayed behind. I opened my private project folder, the one untouched by Helion's systems. Inside was the design I'd nurtured for 2 years, Erebus, an AI system that optimized real-time energy use. It could predict consumption patterns and redistributes supply based on climate conditions, cutting waste by up to 20%. Helion had rejected it once, calling it too complex to fund. I didn't stop. I kept coding through the nights, on my own laptop, saving every line, every log, every hour. I thought of my mother. She had been a mechanical engineer in Dallas, fired after exposing senior managers for stealing her design. That day, she came home holding her termination letter, smiling faintly as she said, "Never let anyone take what you've created. If they can't respect it, let the law teach them." I hadn't understood her then. Now I did, word for word. The following week, Clara started visiting our department more often. She walked in as if the office were her stage. "Amelia," she said, "I heard you're testing a simulation model that sounds intriguing. Mind sharing a draft so I can take a look?" Her tone was soft, polite, but I knew exactly what she wanted. Ethan glanced at me and shook his head slightly. I smiled. "It's not ready yet," I said. "I'll let you know when it is." On Friday afternoon, Clara called me into her private office. The lights were dim, curtains half drawn, just enough to highlight her smile. "Amelia," she began, "I need loyal people during this transition. You're smart, capable, but sometimes I feel you're not aligned with the company's direction." I stayed silent. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Intelligence is valuable, but in an organization, loyalty is what keeps you safe. I looked her straight in the eye. I understand, I said slowly. But it depends on who that loyalty belongs to. A brief pause. Clara tilted her head, her smile freezing in place. I hope you choose the right answer, she said. That night, after everyone had gone, I stayed again. The office was silent except for the soft rain outside. I plugged in a small USB drive, backed up everything: data, logs, and the recording of my conversation with Clara. Then I drafted a resignation letter, left it in my email drafts. The first line read, I hereby resign. I stared at it for a long while, then closed it. I wasn't ready to send it yet. Not until I was done. Walking home, I knew I'd crossed a line. Tomorrow, I will no longer be a loyal Helion employee. I would be the one protecting what was mine. Clara thought I only knew how to bow my head, but she didn't know. Loyalty and silence aren't the same thing. And when they start calling creativity a shared asset, that's when I start locking my door. I arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning. The sky over Austin was still covered in fog, and only the lobby lights of the Helion building were on. I went straight to my desk, poured a strong cup of coffee, and opened my laptop. Last night, I had reread my entire employment contract. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just wanted to make sure what I was about to do was still legal. And then I found it. A small clause buried in the appendix stated that all creations developed during or outside of working hours, but related to Helion's current or future technological direction, would be considered intellectual property owned by the company. It looked harmless at first glance, but to someone with a little experience in IP law like me, it was a quiet declaration of war. I printed the clause, drew a red line under it, and slipped it into a separate folder. Not because I planned to sue immediately, but because I needed to remember. These people once tried to take everything without ever saying it outright. Clara arrived at exactly 8:15, as she always did. She walked past my desk without stopping, but her gaze lingered for half a second, long enough for me to know she knew. Around 9, every employee received an email from HR titled Internal Security Policy Update. I opened it, and the first line made me freeze. All research projects, ideas, models, or tools related to energy, AI, or automation solutions developed by employees during or outside of their employment at Helion, but potentially applicable to the company's strategic direction, must be uploaded to the Helion Cloud Archive no later than Friday. I went still. They weren't even pretending anymore. This was theft rewritten in administrative language, a public demand for every employee's intellectual property, regardless of where or when it was made. No negotiation, no limits, just orders. Ethan knocked softly on the glass door, holding the same printed email in his hand. You saw this, right? He asked, his voice tight. I nodded. This isn't data synchronization, I said. This is legalized confiscation. We opened a private Slack channel and added two old teammates, Tom and Rena. Both had seen the email and were just as unsettled. Rena wrote, Legal hasn't said a word. It's like they expect everyone to comply automatically. Tom added, This could be grounds for a lawsuit if anyone submits and then gets fired. I typed back, short and clear. Nobody uploads anything. Not a single file. I knew I had to act, not out of emotion, but with a plan. The first step was to build proof that Erebus, my AI energy optimization project, had been developed independently, without company resources, outside working hours, and without sharing with anyone inside Helion. I opened all my Git logs, backups, time-stamped screenshots, and emails where I'd sent progress notes to myself. Everything was intact. I'd even recorded videos of myself coding certain course modules late at night, the screen showing date and time, with a radio broadcast playing in the background. I'd known there would come a day I'd need living proof like that. By noon, Clara gathered the entire R&D team for a short meeting. She stood in front of the screen with her usual cold smile. I know some of you may feel uneasy about sharing your personal projects, she began, but I want to remind everyone that Helion is a collaborative environment. If your ideas truly have value, Why not let us help bring them to the world? I raise my hand. What compensation will we receive for contributing to projects developed without pay? Clara turned to me, not surprised in the least. Helion will consider bonus options based on applied outcomes, she said smoothly. But we need trust. We can't keep living in suspicion. Ethan texted me quietly under the table. She's not persuading anyone. She's measuring reactions. I nodded. Exactly. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a test. Clara was mapping out who would resist and who would obey, and I wasn't going to let her predict my next move. That evening, I called an old friend, Julie, an intellectual property lawyer in Denver. I summarized everything and asked, "Do I have the right to keep what I've built?" Julie didn't even hesitate. "If you have proof that your work was created outside your contract scope and without company assets, not only can you keep it, you can defend it in court." We scheduled a meeting for the weekend. I sent her copies of everything: drafts, logs, design files, videos. She replied an hour later, "Your documentation is airtight. If they try to file a patent before you, they'll be in serious trouble." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, staring at the lines of code in Erebus, thinking about my mother, the woman who lost her job because she couldn't prove her ownership. I was different. I wouldn't stay silent. I wouldn't let Helion touch this. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Response Plan A. I didn't know how long this battle would last, but one thing I knew for certain: it started here. I didn't go to the office on Monday. I sent an email requesting 2 days off for personal health reasons. Clara didn't reply. Only HR responded with an automated confirmation. I knew that kind of silence. Professional on the surface, suspicious underneath. Good. She should be suspicious. That morning, I drove straight to a shared workspace called Forge House, about 30 minutes outside downtown Austin. It was tucked between a kombucha bar and a yoga studio. No big sign, no loud entrance. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear quietly. Julie was already there, waiting. She had 3 documents ready: a declaration of invention origin, a sworn statement of independent ownership, and a provisional patent filing form for the USPTO. I'd sent her everything the previous week. All that was left was my signature. "Once we file these," she said, "they'll no longer be able to claim this as internal property. And if they try to use it, even for an internal demo, that's a legal violation." I nodded. I'm not looking to sue. I just want them to understand I'm not the employee they can push around anymore. We filed everything right there on her laptop. Julie hit submit at 9:43 in the morning. I watched the words "provisional patent filing complete" appear on the screen. It felt like the first move in a long, deliberate game. Then I went home. But I didn't rest. I started packing. Not my office belongings, not yet, but everything related to Erebus. Notebooks, sketches, hard drives, receipts for parts I'd bought with my own money. I gathered them all, sealed them in a box, and labeled it Evidence, Private Project. I also recorded a short video walking through my workspace, explaining the process, the tools, and how I ensured I never used any Helion resources. I saved it on a separate USB and locked it away in my personal safe. That night, I wrote my resignation letter, not to send, but to prepare. Every sentence was chosen carefully. No blame, no emotion, only facts and a statement of independence. I didn't want them twisting my words later. Tuesday morning, I returned to Helion. Walking through the front doors felt like acting in a play. I greeted the receptionist, scanned my badge at the elevator, and sat down at my desk as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. I had a way out. And more importantly, I had set a trap. During lunch, I logged into the internal archive system Clara had forced everyone to use for uploading personal projects. I created a folder named Erebus/collab and uploaded a decoy file, a hollow model with just a few meaningless lines of code. In the description, I wrote, "Initial upload, full data coming soon." Ethan watched me, saying nothing. When I turned to him, he nodded slowly. We understood each other. That afternoon, I had my regular one-on-one with Clara. She didn't mention my sick leave at all. She went straight to the point. "Judith, I heard you've started uploading the Erebus files." "Good. I always believed in your abilities, and the company will appreciate your contribution. I smiled. I just want everything to be transparent. You know how it is. With what I'm developing, it's better to have a clear record of who did what and when. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Of course, she said. We encourage transparency, but we also expect full cooperation. I shrugged. Cooperation works both ways. The meeting ended quickly. She didn't show much reaction, but I knew I'd triggered something. I could feel it in the glances behind me, the whispers in the hallway, the look from the legal associate who just happened to walk past my desk. Before leaving that day, I scheduled the resignation letter I'd written to be sent automatically on Friday at 4:30 p.m. At the same moment, the system would email Helion's legal department a copy of the patent registration, along with a formal statement that any unauthorized use would be treated as intellectual property infringement. I also placed a sealed envelope in my desk drawer labeled "To Legal Counsel, Urgent." Inside was a printed copy of the certified patent documents. When I walked out of the building, light rain had begun to fall. I didn't bring an umbrella, but I didn't hurry. The cold drops against my skin felt like waking up after months of exhaustion inside that toxic place. I knew I was leaving soon, but not as a victim this time. I was leaving as someone who had planned everything, and they were about to learn the cost of underestimating me. Friday came faster than I expected. The whole week passed like someone had hit fast forward. Everyone on the team seemed tense. No one said it out loud, but every glance bounced between me and Clara. They could feel the tension rising, even if they didn't know why. I didn't blame them. In the corporate world, silence is a survival skill. At 4:20, I stood up from my desk, shut down my computer, and checked the envelope in my drawer one last time. I hadn't forgotten. People like me don't forget. Every move had been planned. I walked out of the workspace as usual, except this time my heartbeat was steady, slow and sure, like a chess player finishing her final move. At 4:30, the emails went out. The resignation letter hit HR's inbox, along with the patent registration, proof of independent development, and a formal statement of IP ownership. Another copy went to Helion's legal department. The last one, to Clara, had a single line at the top. Thank you for giving me a way out. I wasn't at the office to witness the fallout, but Ethan texted me at 4:43. Clara stormed out of her office. Legal just pulled her into a closed-door meeting. It's happening. I didn't respond. I was sitting at a quiet cafe by the lake, sipping a black coffee. The March air in Texas was still cold, but I felt strangely warm, not from the weather, but from the calm that comes with finally being in control. That evening, I received an email from someone I didn't expect. Derek, head of legal. Subject line, patent filing inquiry. Immediate review needed. His tone was polite and cautious, and he requested a meeting on Monday morning to discuss the ownership status of the Erebus technology. I replied with one sentence, gladly. Please ensure all relevant legal, management, and HR representatives are present. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., 12th floor conference room, the same one used for major partnership negotiations. I arrived on time, wearing the black blazer I kept for serious occasions. Not to look intimidating, but to remind them I wasn't the quiet engineer sitting in the corner anymore. Today, I was the one setting the tone. Inside were Clara, Derek, an HR representative named Maya, and one unfamiliar face, a middle-aged man introduced as Jason, Helion's chief operating officer. He didn't speak, just watched. Derek started in a calm voice. Judith, thank you for coming. First, we want to confirm that we received your documentation, and it's under serious review. I nodded. I'm here to ensure everything remains clear, lawful, and fair. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. Judith, we never intended to take credit for your work, but the fact that you developed technology directly connected to the company's roadmap, even off hours, raises ownership concerns. I turned to Jason. I developed this project using my own equipment, my own time, my own funds. I have witnesses, receipts, programming logs, and recordings, all notarized. Erebus is not part of my employment contract. I use no Helion resources. I don't need permission. I need respect. Jason stayed silent for a few seconds before asking, "So what is it you want, Judith?" I exhaled slowly. "Not revenge. I just want the record to be accurate. And if the company intends to use any part of Erebus, I expect either a licensing agreement or full withdrawal from its use." The room went still. Clara opened her mouth, but Derek raised a hand to stop her. "We'll need time to review everything. During that process, you'll be placed on paid leave with suspended system access." I nodded. "I've already resigned. This is a formal notice." I placed another envelope on the table. "It's a sign-in, termination, and confidentiality agreement. Mutual data protection, both directions. All it needs is your signature." I stood up, not rushing, not theatrical. When my hand touched the doorknob, I turned back and said one final thing. "I'm not sabotaging anyone. I'm protecting what I've built. If that feels like an attack, maybe it's time to rethink how you treat the people who make this place valuable." Then I walked out, leaving behind a tense room, a manager who'd just lost her grip, and a company that had finally realized it underestimated the one person it thought could be controlled. I didn't go back to the office on Tuesday. I didn't log into Slack, didn't check my company email, didn't answer a single call from anyone at Helion. I disappeared from their system, but not from the game. By Wednesday, I had transferred all my personal data to an external drive and created 3 offline backups of every piece of evidence. One copy went to my lawyer, one stayed locked in my safe, and the last hung on a USB around my neck. I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ethan, what had happened in that meeting room. I didn't need to. News has a way of spreading in offices without ever being spoken directly, through glances, side messages, and small talk by the coffee machine. On Friday afternoon, Ethan texted me. "Clara hasn't left her office all day. Something's up." I replied with a single smiling emoji. Nothing more needed to be said. Around the same time, an anonymous post appeared on an internal tech forum. Not an official platform, but one everyone read. The post told the story of a senior engineer forced out after standing up for her intellectual property rights. No names, no company mentioned, but anyone who knew the situation could connect the dots. It spread fast. People started talking about Helion's lack of transparency around ownership policies, about how management was trying to silence talent, and about why the people who build real value are always the ones easiest to discard. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it either. Every reaction of mine was deliberate. That was part of the strategy. I moved my work to a small co-working space on the edge of Austin. Strong Wi-Fi, comfortable chairs, and a coffee machine that never stopped humming. I worked for myself now, not for Helion, adding 2 new features to Erebus I'd never had time to finish: a real-time cost optimization engine and an operational risk prediction module. I also met again with my lawyer, Reggie, an older woman who used to be on Tesla's legal team. She went through my documents, nodding as she read. "You did everything right," she said. "Now, we wait." "How long?" I asked. She smiled. "Until they realize they need you more than you need them." A week later, I got another email from Derek, Helion's head of legal. His tone had changed. No more formal courtesy. It sounded urgent. "Judith, we'd like to arrange a private discussion. No Clara, just Jason and me, possibly with a senior executive present if necessary." I wrote back 3 words. "I'll think about it." Meanwhile, Helion was starting to unravel. A new project called Helion Path was set to be unveiled at the Southern Tech Conference, but the source code was failing. It resembled Erebus, but without its core structure. An old colleague messaged me. "Judith, they're trying to rebuild what you made without you. It's collapsing from the inside." I stayed silent. That silence began to hurt them. Inside the company, Clara grew increasingly isolated. A recording leaked from a team meeting where she said, "Ideas belong to the collective. Individuals don't matter." The backlash was instant. Everyone knew she was trying to erase her tracks. But it was too late. And me? I waited. I learned this early in my career. When you can't control the system, make the system lose control first. And sometimes, silence is the sharpest tool you have. Finally, on a Monday morning, a direct message came from Jason. "No email, no intermediaries. We're ready to negotiate if you still are." I took a sip of coffee, smiled, and typed my reply. I've got time now. I arrived on time, not too early to seem eager, not late enough to lose the upper hand. Inside me was a strange calm, like the eye of a storm arriving after the wind. When I stepped into the hotel lobby where they had chosen to hold this internal meeting, I wondered if they really understood who they were facing. Derek, head of Helion Legal, stood to greet me. Jason, the product director, nodded with a cautious look. Clara was not there. Maybe finally, someone realized leaving her out was the smartest move they had made since this all began. We sat down. Derek opened with the usual tone you use when negotiating the price of an apartment, not when addressing a serious intellectual property dispute. Judith, first of all, thank you for coming. We regret the recent misunderstandings. We hope today we can resolve issues professionally. I did not answer. I looked at him and nodded, signaling him to continue. Jason spoke about appreciating my quiet contributions over the years, admitting there may have been shortcomings in recognition, and saying Helion very much wanted to keep the collaboration. Those hollow phrases, too familiar. I had heard this kind of excuse for 9 years at Helion, especially from people who only showed up after a project began to run smoothly. I set my glass down and cut him off. I did not come here to hear apologies. I came to lay out terms. Silence. Short and taut like a bowstring pulled to its limit. I reached into my bag, took out 3 binders, and placed them in front of them one by one. Copyright registration documents. Sworn declarations of ownership for the 3 core components of the Erebus system. All signed, sealed, with clear filing timestamps. Derek flipped through a few pages. Jason stared at the title header, Harlow Predictive Routing Engine. Exactly what they were using. You did not just use the technology I built without permission, I said slowly. You tried to seize ownership. That is not an internal mistake. That is deliberate conduct. Derek sighed. Judith, we do not deny there were oversights. No, I interrupted. This is no longer about oversight. I sent warnings 3 months ago, before the trial product was revealed. You ignored them. You thought I would stay silent, as always. I pulled out a contract. My proposal. The final draft was prepared by my lawyer. These are my demands. First, Helion must publicly acknowledge that the entire core architecture of Erebus, including the routing engine, load balancing system, and optimization protocol, was developed independently by me. Second, Helion will sign a 3-year license to use the system with a fixed fee plus a percentage of profits. Third, Clara will not appear in any media, press releases, or credits related to Erebus. Finally, I retain full legal rights for any versions or derivative branches built on the current architecture. Jason rolled his eyes. Derek frowned. I let them sit with it. You want to seize control without working for the wall. Company, Jason said, trying to stay calm. No, I answered. I only want what belongs to me. You are the cheaters. I am asking for my piece back. Derek said we need more time to. I shook my head. No. You already had time. You chose to ignore. Now I will not give you a choice. 1 hour. After that, I sent all these documents to the press and to investors. Jason stood and walked out of the room. Derek stayed seated and sighed. We cannot meet every condition, he said. Then I wished them luck with the lawsuit to come. I stood, leaving the documents on the table. No threats, no yelling. I only needed certainty, and I had it. I left the meeting and went to the cafe downstairs for an espresso. My mind was not filled with vengeance, just logic. Helion would not gamble with this. They could not afford this story to break before the product launch. 56 minutes later, I received an email. The contract attached matched my conditions, with one added clause: keep all internal information confidential. I smiled. What they feared most was not losing technology, it was losing face. I signed, not to finish things, but to begin a new chapter where I hold the pivot. A week later, Helion held the official launch for the Erebus platform at the Tech Horizons West Conference, inside the McLean Plaza Convention Center, where startups came to redraw the future and corporations came to hold on to the present. My name wasn't on the guest list, and it didn't need to be. I sat in the 4th row like any regular attendee, dark glasses on, earbuds in, as if I were streaming the event online. But I wasn't. I was just watching. Because this wasn't a battle anymore. This was the victory parade. On stage, Clara stood with a microphone in hand, smiling the kind of smile trained through hours of media coaching. She began her speech with the usual rhetoric about Helion's relentless spirit of innovation and the pioneering technology redefining the landscape of AI logistics. I didn't feel anger, only fatigue. Those polished words were once my dream. Now they were just a hollow shell covering something they never built themselves. Jason sat at the executive table, nodding every time Clara emphasized real-time operational optimization. I wondered if either of them even understood how the algorithm worked, or if they were simply reciting lines from the slides I had written last year. When the live demo started, I held my breath, not out of worry, but curiosity. I wanted to see how far they had bent the system to avoid colliding with the original version I had registered. On the massive LED screen, the logistics map came to life, data points blinking rapidly. For the first few seconds, the system ran smoothly, routes optimized, paths adjusted in real time. I had to admit, they'd patched more than I expected. Then a warning appeared. Error code 406. The demo continued, but the map froze, the route refusing to update. A technician rushed in from backstage to fix it. Clara kept smiling, reading her script as if nothing had happened. But I knew. I had built that logic block myself, a legal failsafe. If the data stream didn't pass through a licensed verification sequence, the system would stop responding after 90 seconds. Not crash, not break, just pause. A silent way of saying, you don't have the key. I didn't have to make any public statement. Everything had already been handled behind the scenes. At the conference reception desk, a press release went out exactly at 9:30, precisely when they started their demo. It read, Helion officially confirms that the core framework of the Erebus platform is licensed from independent creator Judith Harlow, who retains full patent and intellectual property rights. No need for shouting, no lawsuits, just one line of text, enough for everyone in that room to understand. Clara's grand presentation instantly became a speech footnoted with the words sourced elsewhere. I saw people exchange glances. A tech journalist in the front row started typing furiously. The event host checked his phone, then looked back at the stage, visibly tense. Then came the email. A friend from the startup world, the same one who'd once asked why I didn't go solo, sent me a link. Helion launches Erebus using licensed technology from a former engineer forced out of the company. It was from a major tech publication, less than 30 minutes old, already with over 2,000 shares. The article included contract excerpts, screenshots of the patent filing, and even an audio recording of my meeting with Clara. I didn't know who had leaked it, but clearly someone had finally had enough of her. I smiled, not out of triumph, just relief. Everything that needed to be said had been said, without me. Midway through the presentation, someone handed Clara a piece of paper. She read it, and her face froze. She rushed through her closing lines and walked off stage to a thin round of applause. Jason didn't look at her. I stood, took off my glasses, and left the hall as they fumbled with the closing slides. Outside, the sunlight was brilliant, a perfect day to stop being forgotten. I didn't go back to the conference. There was no need. I used to think that if I ever won, I'd want to stand in the main hall, face Clara, and say something cutting. But I didn't. She had already fallen by the very weapon she'd underestimated most, intelligence that was organized and legally protected. I stopped by my usual cafe on the corner of Parker. The owner nodded at me, as if I were a regular, even though I'd only been there a few times. Maybe it was because I never asked for the Wi-Fi password, never ordered trendy drinks. I just said, black coffee, no sugar, no ice. I sat in the corner, opened my laptop. My inbox overflowed, over 200 unread emails, most of them interview requests, collaboration offers, or private consulting invitations. A few investors wanted to meet. A CTO from the company that once rejected my demo sent an email with only 3 words. Judith, I'm sorry, I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. I clicked on one from Dorian, founder of Anzen Labs, a startup I'd quietly followed for almost a year. He once said at a conference, "Innovation without ownership is just charity." That line had haunted me for months after I left Helion. His email was short and clear. "Your system is too good not to grow. We're ready to go long term. You lead. We support. Friday afternoon work for you?" I took a sip of coffee and opened a file labeled Judith AI Ops V1.1, something I had quietly been developing ever since being pushed out. Not for revenge, for the purpose. To build something truly efficient, free from corporate politics and strategic hypocrisy. I saved the file and closed the laptop, no rush. Some things deserve to begin in silence, like seeds in good soil, unseen but resolute. On the way home, I passed the Helion building. The digital banner in the lobby no longer mentions Erebus. No Clara, no Jason. Just the same tired slogan about human values, empty as an outdated PR pitch. I didn't go inside. I didn't even look up at the floor that used to be my office. I just stood there for 30 seconds, long enough to confirm what I already knew. I no longer belonged there, and maybe I never truly did. At home, I pulled out an old box. Inside were the kinds of things no one would believe could start an empire: 3 worn notebooks, a faded rubber USB drive, and a wrinkled scrap of paper from my old roommate that read, "When the world won't listen, let your code speak for you." I laid everything out on the table. That's how real engineers begin, not with money, but with ideas and persistence. By Friday afternoon, I walked into the Anzen Labs office. No receptionist, just a wooden sign that said, "Find your own way, just like you always have." Dorian shook my hand. No lengthy contract, no PowerPoint deck. He handed me a single folder with 2 bold lines inside. Chief of Innovation, Judith Harlow. To be executed with full ownership over all developed systems. I signed my name. Lightly, like placing a period at the end of an old sentence, and the first word of a new one. One where no one could erase my name from the system I created. That evening, I didn't celebrate. I stood on the rooftop watching the city lights stretch across the skyline. Somewhere out there, people like me were still working quietly, steady, underestimated, resilient. But with a little preparation, a little patience, and the right to own what they build, they could make entire systems stop and listen. I texted Darla, my former mentee who still worked at Helion. Just one line. "When you're ready to build something that truly belongs to you, call me." She read it instantly. 2 words appeared. "Always ready." I smiled. No need for retaliation. No need for revenge. Because real victory is when you no longer have to prove anything, and the world still remembers your name, not as a former employee, but as a creator, as an owner. No one tells me to resign anymore. Now I begin. I stood on that rooftop for a long time, letting the wind carry away the remnants of old years. Below me, the city stayed loud and hurried, as if no one had ever been pushed out of a dream. But I knew somewhere out there, someone needed to hear this, to remember that not every failure is an ending, and that sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel, but with lines of code written in silence. Which moment in this story made you pause? Was it Darla's look? The moment I walked out without turning back? Or when they finally realized the system they were so proud of was never truly theirs? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, because I believe every story lives on through the hearts of those who feel it. And if you want to stay with me through stories of persistence, justice, and unexpected turnarounds, subscribe and hit the bell, because maybe the next story will be yours. Thank you for listening.